Hello and welcome to another episode of Tu Tia Bruja. I'm Bex Carlos. So tomorrow's 420, and if you've been here a while, you know that every year I make an entire cannabis-infused menu. Last year I did 3 courses and 2 different cocktails. This year I am partnering with Melissa Martinez, who you might follow on Instagram as Bruja for the Animals. She also has a Patreon and she's on TikTok. And seeing her do this really inspired me, like I'm really supportive of everyone who listens to the show, who works on some sort of project because, it takes a lot to put yourself out there and to create something, and it can give you a lot of purpose. And that's how I feel about this podcast and the stuff that I put on my Patreon. So I'm really happy for Melissa to be doing the same thing. So this year, the menu is completely plant-based. It's vegan. I am not against trying different types of food to making food taste good, no matter what it is. Let's get into this episode and we can talk a little bit more about the project and how it came to be. Again, this season is all about collaboration, so I'm super excited to have Melissa Martinez on the show, who is a content creator, animal activist. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Do you mind expanding a little bit about your magic practice? What kind of fuels your magic? Where does your magic come from?
Absolutely. I have been practicing bruja for going on 6 years now. It has always been in the back of my mind and in little things that I do and ways that I connect with the earth and with my family. And I'm a theater creator and educator. So it's always been in there. But I lost my grandparents and some animals that were really, really important in my life, sort of all at the same time. And it set me in a little bit of a spiral. And I thought, how can I come out of this? What can I do? And immediately I was like, I want to learn all I can about witchcraft. I don't know why. I have no idea why, but that's something that I need to learn about. So I just started studying, and within that, I realized that I was very connected to ancestral magic, and that was part of what took me into witchcraft, is that I really wanted to connect with those that I had lost recently and beyond.
I love that. There's something about ancestral magic because I do a lot of that as well. There comes a time where I feel like your ancestors just really want to be heard. And it's finding those ways to start to build a relationship with them, even though they're no longer in this realm.
Absolutely. Like this is so weird to say, but I felt them calling me, I didn't know how to speak to them, and I felt them like knocking on my counters. I would wake up to hearing them say my name, and I'm like, what is this? I have to know more. And growing up in a Latina household, my mom, she's still like kind of nervous about it. And she's like, oh, the devil, you don't want to bring the devil. And that was always something that I heard and kept me away from it. But I felt like I had to be brave and I had to step into that because they were calling me and I needed to respond.
And it's wild once you start building that relationship, whether through leaving offerings or, trying to take time to just dedicate to your lost loved ones. Sometimes, you look around and you just see all these signs and it's just your ancestors trying to communicate with you. And I think it's truly beautiful.
One of the things that really stuck with me was growing up, my family never celebrated Dia de los Muertos. And that was something that when I had loved ones pass, I didn't understand why not. It was sort of a religious thing. It didn't go with their religion. But I decided I was going to start learning about that and figuring out how to connect with my ancestors in that way, because it is part of our heritage and our culture. And I wanted to, be submerged in that more than I have ever been. I was born in Mexico, but I moved here when I was 3 with my parents and became a girl of the Northern California suburbs and have never really connected to my culture in that way, except when I would go to Mexico to visit my family during the summertime. Then I would be surrounded with culture and family and love and noise. But that was something I never had living in America where I am now. So I wanted to bring that to me, even though I'm here and not in Mexico.
I resonated with so many of the different things that you just said, but one thing I really wanted to touch base on was the fact that my family never celebrated Dia de Muertos either. You know, the religious aspect, right? It makes people feel like, oh no, that there's something evil in that. You know, it was an indigenous holiday. You know, there's maybe a connotation there, but I think another connotation is a lot of people have, you know, this gift to be able to communicate with the dead. And my grandmother had that, which I think has now shown in different family members. But I think it was her way of also protecting her children of what they could see or what they could interact with or whatever. But I think that it's important to remember that we didn't kind of grow up with it. We can use it as an opportunity to connect with loved ones, you know, that have since passed. Sometimes you have to just dive into the things that like scare you a little bit. And you said you had done that too. In what ways now that you're not so scared anymore, do you connect with your loved ones who are no longer here? What makes you feel close to them?
Definitely my ancestor altar. I spend a lot of time with it and all the Sabbats, especially during Dia de los Muertos. I make it bigger, but I definitely talk to them as well. I remember when my grandmother, my mom's mom passed. She passed during the pandemic in November. And, you know, it was really hard for us and for my mom because we weren't able to go see her. In fact, I know she was protecting me because we had decided, and this was in the middle of the like hardest part of the pandemic, that we were going to, she was living in Texas at the time. We're going to drive to Texas to go see her because the doctors had said, you know, there's not much time. And I was like, we have to go see grandma. So I was going to take a week off of work. I didn't care. My mom was going to get us a car and we were going to drive down there because we thought that was safer than flying. And the morning that we were supposed to leave, she passed. So we weren't able to go to her funeral and it was really, really hard. And I was lighting my Santa Muerte candle for her. And she, being very religious and very strict in that, would have hated that. But I was devastated. And this was how I connected with my ancestors that had passed recently. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And the candle kept blowing out inside a house, no wind to be found anywhere. And the third time it happened, I went, okay, abuelita, te oigo. I hear you. And I didn't try to light it again for her. But I was like, all right, no Santa Muerte for you. But I leave them some tequila. Sometimes I leave them offerings on my ancestor altar. I also burn copal incense, and that really brings me to connecting with my ancestors. It's, you know, a sacred indigenous tree of ours in Mexico, and I feel very close to it. You know, when I first started practicing and I didn't really know anything, I used to burn sage and I was trying to figure out what would connect with me. And the more information I found out, I was like, oh, copal is what connects me. And immediately when I started burning it, I felt it. I was like, oh yeah, this is it. This is what's going to get me there. And every morning when I get ready to go to work, I make coffee for me and my grandparents. And what I really love about that is that, you know, before they passed and they were here, I would think about them on holidays and when I would talk to them or once a week, you know, but now with this ritual, I think about them every single day. I make coffee and I make myself a cup and I make them a cup and I put it on the altar and I say hi to them and I feel them with me every single day, which is really, really special. And the only time they don't get a fresh cup of coffee is when I don't have time to make myself coffee. So it's either both of us or neither of us get it. So that's really special for me as well.
Heating up your ancestors, you know, so when you do that, it makes it so they're so much more active. You hear them, you know, like they're giving you signs and information. Keep in mind, though, if they ever get a little too chatty or you just need them to like, it's like, I love you guys, but I need you to take it down a little bit, give them a mint tea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Where is your ancestral altar?
It's in my living room on top of a bookshelf.
Okay. Mine for the longest time was in my bedroom. And so I had a lot of issues with sleeping because I just felt like they were contacting me all of the time. So yeah, having it in a more communal or public space is always really good. So it seems like you are establishing better magical boundaries than I was with mine.
Wait, so how come mint tea? That's really interesting because my grandmother grew mint in her garden and my mom still does that. So what properties of tea make them calm down?
So it's more of the herb. Mint is a cooling herb, like whereas like coffee, it's hot, it's kind of going to get you moving. Kind of like with spice, right? Like if you're trying to like with your magic heat it up and get more stuff going, you're going to want like something hot, something spicy, something whatever. But when you're trying to like cool it down or mellow it, you're going to want to use something cold, like cold water or mint because it has more of a cooling property. You could also use like cucumber. Cucumber is also like a cooling plant. So, yeah.
Okay, all right. Cucumber and mint tea. Well, if they ever get, sassy with me, I will definitely use that.
Yeah. Because I think food is so powerful and it's a way of connecting with our ancestors, in a way that sometimes I feel like we take for granted. And I'd really love to chat because with your Patreon, you're doing all of these rad things as far as creating recipes and content that helps different organizations. So, how did your Patreon start? And if you don't mind kind of going into that, what are your goals with it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking and having me on because it is something I'm very passionate about. And in this moment in time, one of the only things that is bringing me joy is this Patreon and who and what I'm fighting for. So I'm vegan. I've been vegan going on 5 years now. My vegan journey and my Bruja journey started at the exact same time. To me, they are very much interlinked. I have always loved animals. I've always been a huge animal advocate. Even when I was little, taking birds and baby squirrels to the Lindsay Wildlife Rehabilitation where I'm from. But I have always eaten meat. It has been a huge part of my family's just how they have connected to each other ever since I was little. Huge part of my culture, huge part of, my family's ancestry. And in fact, I have tried to go vegetarian a couple of times in my life. And each and every time, the thing that knocked me off of my journey was one of my grandparents not understanding, feeling hurt, not respecting my choices, just them thinking that it was ridiculous and silly. And I distinctly remember my grandmother saying, "Oh, you don't like my cooking," in like a very hurtful way, which I know now to be a little manipulative, but at the time I was like, oh my gosh, how can I do this? And also, I love meat. I am not a vegan person who does not like the taste of meat. I still think about it in ways that, oof, man, I really love meat. So it was without support, it was hard for me to keep my vegetarianism going. Then, about 5 years ago, like I said, I lost members of my family and I lost some animal companions that were very, very close to me. And one day I was like, I just don't want to eat meat anymore. In fact, the recipe that you and I made together, that was the very first thing I made that is usually in my family made with chicken. And I just put vegetables in it instead. It wasn't like a conscious, like, I'm vegetarian now choice. I just couldn't do it. So I put veggies in there instead. And, my family was over because we were all consoling each other. And my brother kind of asked like, oh, this is delicious. How come? Why not chicken and why these veggies instead? And I went, I just don't think I can do this anymore. And he went, yeah, I understand. That makes sense. So that started my curiosity into, I'm not going to say curiosity, I'm going to say bravery, because I've always known that the animal industrial complex in the United States, it has been terrible. I've always known that subconsciously. But as humans, we do a really good job of like separating those things. And I don't think it's entirely our faults. I think those industries that profit do a really good job of making us forget what it is we're actually consuming and what had to happen to have us consume those things. And so I got really, really brave and I knew it was going to upset me and, probably make me cry a little, but I went in going, I want to know everything. If I'm going to eat meat, consume dairy, eggs, whatever, I want to know it. I want to do it knowing everything that had to happen for me to have this meal. I just have to. And it was really hard. And I don't think without Instagram, I actually would have been able to hold on to it. But now that we are connected by social media, I was able to just put in vegan, hashtag vegan, and all of this stuff came up. And some of the stuff I really didn't connect with at all, but some of it really hit home for me, like really, really connected with me. And I wasn't perfect at first. I also said to myself, I was going to be very, very kind to myself because I knew this was going to be hard for me. It didn't end up being as hard as I thought it was, but I thought it was going to be really difficult. I said, you're going to be very kind to yourself. And if you eat meat, if you eat dairy, if you eat this, it's okay. You don't even have to feel bad about it. It's okay. And, the next day you will move on and we will keep going. And just giving myself that like breath of, I don't have to be perfect, made it much, much easier for me. And to have these Instagram profiles, have these inspiring stories of these beautiful animals really kept my resolve. So that's what started my vegan journey. And I became a Patreon of sanctuaries. I started volunteering at a sanctuary and I met these animals face to face. And that really strengthened my resolve. When we went into quarantine was actually really amazing for my veganism because I was in charge of every single thing I ate. And it's really easy for me to make compassionate choices when it's just up to me. It's when I go into the world and I'm starving and the only thing available is Doritos. Before the pandemic, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to starve. I'm going to accept these Doritos from my friend or, things that's a silly example, but things like that. But I was the only person in charge of what I ate. I was able to make all of the compassionate choices. And also that's when I started veganizing my grandparents' cooking. So I started to take my grandmother's chorizo con papas, my grandmother's picadillo, the vegan cazuela was like a chicken cazuela. And I started to really hone in on those vegan recipes. And it was a very emotional journey for me because I thought I would never be able to taste those things again, which were things that connected me with my grandparents in a very deep way. And then I realized I could. I just had to do it for myself. I couldn't rely on restaurants or grocery stores. I just had to do it for myself, which was great, actually. It was really, really great. So moving forward, I became Patreon to some of these sanctuaries, and I realized just how many animals are suffering, right? It never really dawned on me that every time I saw a farm animal outside a car window or in a field, that animal only existed because it was going to be used for humans. It was going to be exploited for humans. I didn't realize that until I became vegan. And that was really hard for me because, in California, I see cows all the time and goats and chickens. And just knowing that if a farm animal does not live in a sanctuary or isn't somebody's personal pet, which rarely happens with farm animals, that they are going into the animal industrial complex and will be exploited for what they have. So I just wanted to do more, and I always want to do more. And, the wolf sanctuary that both of us follow, they had a very scary thing happen with one of their wolves. And at that moment, I had no extra money to give to them. And I was like, I don't care. I want to help them somehow, some way. How will I be able to help more animals that I'm already helping? And what do I have that people might want in exchange for them helping with funds? And I thought, well, I have my vegan Mexican recipes and I have my spells, which I've been working on and honing and crafting these last 6 years, and which have really fucking worked sometimes for me, to the fact where I was like, I didn't expect them to. And I am very protective of those spells, but I will be willing to trade them if I could help more animals and if I can help the people who help more animals, because being somebody who is in charge of animal welfare when no one else cares can be really exhausting and really sad and feel really lonely and scary. And I want to help them feel like somebody has their back, even if it's just for a little bit or with a little bit. As many donations as I can get, even $1 helps. That's the story.
I talked about this in the last podcast episode. A lot of people will sort of think that because they don't have money to contribute, they can't contribute. We all have knowledge and resources and information that we can trade, like you said, for funds to help people or for whatever things. And, seeing you do all this work has been super inspiring to me because I am all about supporting people who support the things that really light a fire in them. And yours is animal activism. And I love that. That's sort of why I reached out to you on the project that we've collaborated on together. So if you've been following the podcast or, just my content or you're a member of my Patreon, I've started this tradition where I do like a whole cannabis infused menu every year. Last year it was a 3-course meal with 2 different cocktails. But this year, I wanted to challenge myself because I am not vegan, but I love being able to experiment with food, and figuring out different ways to make things. And I don't know, I think the excuse that a lot of people use too, it's like, oh, if you're, vegan or if you're plant-based, your diet is plant-based, it doesn't taste the same. And I'm like, I think that's laziness. Bottom line, I think that's laziness. That was something I wanted to ask you as well, as sort of where the origins of this dish came from. But the fact that, like, it was a family thing that you then kind of just tweaked to your veganism is really rad. Mine actually, like the whole concept of my part, which is also kind of like the photo shoot, I want to expand upon that. It's a photo of Rick Moranis.
I love that photo.
Okay, it's a really and I'm going to include the artist in the show notes. I have to tag him in the photo as well. But my sister's partner has this portrait of Rick Moranis, and I just love it because, listen, we stand Rick Moranis here. He was a great actor, and he's still living, but the fact that he gave up his acting career to raise his children instead of just getting like a nanny or whatever when his wife, I think she passed from cancer, but when she was like going through it, that's very admirable.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Last summer when I was in Mexico and my father and I just needed to like get away, we would always get cantaritos and we would get tacos. And so that's sort of where mine was inspired from, is like, what could be something I could play around with that would make a really good taco. And I think I did it, I think
It was delicious.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I loved yours, which is a Mexican lasagna. And if you follow Melissa or you follow myself, because these recipes will be available on our respective Patreons. But you made a Mexican lasagna, which is delicious. You had given me the recipes like without any of the infusion. The infusion was something that I made, but I know that I had told you that I had added a little bit of like olive oil to it, and it helped give it a different texture, which was nice because it made me think of ricotta, so which traditionally goes in lasagna, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a baby, so I only did half of the Serrano. But that worked out because then I was able to add that to my sauce, which I feel like that sauce truly made the tacos.
The coconut milk sauce.
Yeah.
I was blown away. I don't usually cook with coconut milk because I'm afraid that it's going to have a sweet flavor to it. I don't know why I think that. It is unsweetened coconut milk, but it was delicious and it didn't taste sweet at all. It was so good. I agree with you. That sauce is amazing.
That sauce, I think, really makes the tacos, because the tacos on their own are fine, but with that sauce, it's like another level. The whole menu very much came together very well.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the fact that I had to actually sit down and write this recipe out, because I've just been making it forever with my mom. And she, I asked her, like, how long should we make the tomatoes? And she goes, you'll smell it. And I'm like, Mom, I can't write that in the recipe notes. So we have to sit here and time it. But I'm really glad I did, because now we'll have it forever and ever.
Sounds like your mom cooks the exact same way that my mom cooks, which is like how I cook too. So it's, as much as I love doing these photo shoots and like, having the cannabis infused stuff, and it's very like fun, I think, because it gives a little bit of a spin on edibles, because I feel like people think like candies and gummies and all these things. So it's nice to have something a little different. But like you said, it is nice to finally have the measurements instead of I just do it until I feel like I shouldn't, which is how a lot of us learn to cook.
Absolutely. The one thing that, like I said, what I offer in my Patreon is spells and recipes, which are two of the things that I don't have anything written down for. I do it on intuition. So that's been the most challenging and most fun. And one of the things that I really want is to build a community. So, I reach out to my Patreons and I say, tell me what you want and I will do it, because I really want us to be a family on there and go on adventures together and get what we want out of life. So it's been challenging, but also really fun.
I'm very thankful for all of my patrons because they definitely help with a lot of the costs that go into this podcast. But there's no guide, right, of how much content you should create and how often you should do it. And I'm really happy to have created this with you, and I hope your patrons get a lot out of it. And also something that I didn't do in the past, but I'm glad we're doing this time because I know that cannabis isn't really something that you indulge in, but the fact that we're going to have both the infused version, if you want to partake in that, but also the normal version. And you should have the option to make it either way.
Yes, I am a sensitive babe. My brother has some stories. Really excited. And I can't wait to show my brother your infused version so that we can have fun with that as well.
Yeah, I've included it in the past, but I'm going to include it again, is a dosage calculator, because the thing is with any type of indulgence, whether it be smoking or eating, you have to know how much and what you're consuming. And so being able to do all the math of this is how much it is as far as plant wise, and this is what the potency is going to be. And then how many servings to you have to go in with some knowledge. We got to be smart babes around here.
Yeah.
A lot of math. All right. Well, where can everyone find you on the internet, Melissa?
My personal account on Instagram is dancing.with.kittens. And then my Patreon account is Bruja for the Animals. And that is also on Patreon. And that is also on TikTok. All of those are Bruja for the Animals. And everything you find there is going to be going towards the Patreon, how you can join, all the tiers, and all of that good stuff.
Yes. And I will include the link to your Patreon in the show notes, and the recipes and everything will drop tomorrow. We'll have some teaser stuff on social media probably later tonight, if not tomorrow for sure. But all of the full recipes, all the cool things you want to try are only accessible on Melissa's or my Patreon. So thank you again, Melissa, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. I hope to have you in this space again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope it resonated with you in some way. And if you're curious about the recipes, be sure and add me on Patreon or support Melissa's Patreon. The recipes will be available in both places. Remember, you can keep up with me. The best place is typically Instagram at Tu Tia Bruja. You can catch my personal at Bexby Caston. I'm also on TikTok, but I feel like I'm not good at TikToking. I don't know, at Tu Tia Bruja. And you can always catch the podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening. Have a good one. And if I don't see you tomorrow, happy 420. Take care of yourself. Be safe. Consume responsibly. I love you. Bye.
Mm.